Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Stephen Kanarik with the Tropical Analysis and Forecast Branch of the National Hurricane Center. I will be doing today's tropical Atlantic marine weather briefing for Thursday, February 22nd, 2024. Our main concern over the next 5 days involves a gale warning that's in effect for portions of the Southwest Atlantic from Friday afternoon through Saturday. A cold front will be pushing off the east coast of the United States, and out ahead of it, southwesterly winds of 30 to 35 knots should develop offshore northeast Florida. Those will spread east with time to areas south of Bermuda. Quiet conditions are expected through the next 5 days, so through early next week for the Gulf of Mexico and Caribbean. Let's take a look at our current conditions as well as the conditions we expect through this evening. You'll note here a cold front that is stretching from around Bermuda to the southwest toward the Greater Antilles. This front is not terribly strong. It will be moving to the east and continuing to weaken, but it is still producing some strong southerly winds out ahead of it, 20 to 25 knots. The rest of the basin is really being dominated by high pressure. The strongest center of high pressure is near the Bahamas. Right here, you can see this is creating generally moderate or lower winds across most of the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico. The cold front that will be causing the gale here, you can see with developing gale offshore Florida, that's still back over the southern plains of Texas, but it's going to be moving quickly east here over the next 24 hours. For seas, a large chunk of the Atlantic has seas of 10 to 12 feet, with the highest behind this weakening frontal boundary. So let's go forward in time and take a look at the forecast for tomorrow, Friday. You'll note this cold front that was over the southern plains will be moving quickly eastward and beginning to push offshore the east coast of the United States, with gale conditions developing out ahead of it. Where the gale force southwesterly winds will occur, we'll have some seas of 12 to 16 feet. Elsewhere, the high pressure that was over the Bahamas will be pushing also quickly eastward, but will remain dominating much of the weather over the Caribbean and even the Gulf of Mexico, with the frontal boundary, the east frontal boundary, beginning to stall and dissipate. So we head into Saturday, gale conditions will continue out ahead of the front, especially up toward 31 north, so areas south of Bermuda, down to about 28 north are the areas that are under the gale warning right now. With the cold front pushing through the Gulf of Mexico, there will be a wind shift toward the north in the Gulf of Mexico, but there really shouldn't be any speeds above fresh. Pretty quiet conditions for the Caribbean, and most of the Atlantic will also be seeing winds fresh or less. By Sunday, this main cold front will begin to weaken, so gales will end. Still some winds out ahead of it, southwesterly, 20 to 25 knots, can't be ruled out. Another weak front that won't really play too much of an impact on marine weather will be pushing off the southeastern United States. So overall, conditions on Sunday, fairly tranquil for most of Atlantic waters, with winds for the most part fresh or lower. The seas generated by those previous gales will be impacting a pretty large area of the Southwest Atlantic, having seas of 10 to 14 feet with lower totals across the rest of the area. As we go into Monday, we stopped displaying the features here on the map, but you'll be able to see, based on the wind speeds, that we still will have a cold front in roughly the area highlighted, but overall conditions will be improving. The strongest winds will be offshore Colombia, 20 to 25 knot trade winds in that area. The rest of the area should generally be under 20 knots of wind. The seas will be coming down as well, with the overall swell generated by earlier gales still bringing seas of 8 to 12 feet in the area I have highlighted. And finally, for Tuesday, this is roughly the location of the now dissipating kind of stationary front from earlier in the forecast period. There will be some fresh to maybe some locally strong winds back behind the front. We'll continue with the strong winds offshore Colombia. Winds will also start to increase through the passages into the Caribbean, and winds will increase a little in the northwest Gulf of Mexico as well, out ahead of the next cold front that won't be entering the area until the middle or latter parts of next week. Seas by this time will all be below 12 feet, with the highest values back behind the decaying cold front over the northern Atlantic. So to summarize, Atlantic gale warning for areas to the north of the Bahamas and also to the east of northeast Florida. That begins Friday afternoon through Saturday for southwesterly winds ahead of a cold front, 30 to 35 knots. Elsewhere, no hazards expected through Tuesday. The Gulf of Mexico will have a weak cold front that pushes through, but in general, high pressure dominates with winds less than 20 knots and seas to less than 6 feet. For the Caribbean Sea, normal trade winds prevail, some pulsing east to northeast winds, at times as much as 30 knots offshore Colombia. And then as we get into Monday and Tuesday, some locally strong winds, or at least fresh winds, will be ongoing through the northern passages, including the Windward Passage and Mona Passage. Thanks for attending today's briefing. We'll have our next briefing Sunday afternoon, February 25th, before 5 p.m. Have a good weekend.